Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight.
Welcome, everybody. This is a slice of humble pie with your hosts and friends, hopefully, Stephanie and Titus Bilo. And this is an episode about Magnolia, part 2, but really about part 1. Because part 2, we kind of talked about the miracle of Maggie as a 4-year-old, almost a 5-year-old. But then as we were talking about that, we thought, we should probably go back and tell a little bit more about that story at the beginning and how Magnolia's life started, because it was very complicated and difficult. And as that passage illustrates at the beginning, it was far beyond our understanding. And that was very scary, but also very uplifting and amazing. We can say that now. That doesn't mean many of the moments were pleasant or enjoyable. However, perspective gives us the ability to look back and say, thank you, God, for doing what you knew needed to happen for us. Anything to add?
Can I just actually talk about, just for a second?
Yeah.
We had childlike faith. Number one, the Bible says that adults should teach children. And number two, the Bible also says the children have a lot to teach adults. And I just find it interesting that we have these religious leaders in Scripture, but also in today, arguing about it. And it's like, these kids, there's something you forgot. These kids can teach you. We become too serious, I think, as adults. And it doesn't say have a childish faith.
Mm-hmm.
It says have a childlike faith, that innocent faith. We tell our children something and it's so easy for them to believe us. We have to be careful. And here we are, so hard-hearted in our old age. And I just thought a lot about that since we did that episode. There's a lot to be said about childlike faith. I think we could write a whole book about it. Probably are tons out on the shelves. But I think this experience that we're going to talk about right now, we were trying to think of a name of it before we even started it. And it's like, yes, it's childlike faith, but this was literally like all faith is God-given, but this was like a double, triple, quadruple, 1,000th dose of God's given faith.
A super dose.
All at once.
Yeah.
Like they call that bolus, a bolus bag of magnesium when you're in the hospital, like a big bag of IV all at once. That's as a bolus.
And that made your
of God's faith.
That made your whole body go on fire on the outside
bolus.
in pain. This was fire of the Holy Spirit burning from the inside kind of bolus. I don't think I've ever heard a bolus of the Holy Spirit or bolus of faith before.
Our nurse friends know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah.
We're going to copyright that.
Lots of good stuff happened.
That's what your book can be called.
I'm writing
Instead
a book.
Of childlike faith, it's going to be a bolus of faith.
A bolus. It's catchy.
Yeah.
So where do we begin?
I was thinking, kind of wanted to all hit the fan for us.
Okay.
Because I think that's kind of for me, the coolest way to get into it.
Yeah.
But I'll just set the context a little bit. Because in one of the previous episodes, you heard about our, kind of the start of our relationship and getting married, and that's kind of where we stopped. And then shortly after we got married, we had Titus Emmanuel Bilo Jr., and I got pregnant shortly after getting married. We really wanted to make sure that the children we were going to have were close enough in age to the 2 wonderful boys Steph already had. And so that was kind of on our, I guess, big scheme plan to have a child, and you weren't going to wait more than another day to have a child. She's like, every day, it's like, oh, it's time. Okay. So we had Ty about a year after our wedding, and then kind of I would say maybe a little bit sooner than we were planning, but we got pregnant again.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
I don't know, how long after? Another
So,
half year?
Well,
After.
we found out we were pregnant on Ty's first birthday
Okay, yeah.
in March, so.
And you're kind of, thinking like, oh, maybe we should have a year or two or whatever, but
Whatever.
things happen sometimes. Yeah, our plans are not even our plans sometimes. Anyway, so like Magnolia, this pregnancy. So at this point, we obviously don't know it's Magnolia. But you're pregnant, and we're like,
It was
okay,
great.
This
Everything
is
was
happening.
great. We even had appointments leading up to that point. Everything was healthy. We had the heartbeat. We had, our checkups, OB appointments, all that.
Yeah,
it was great.
And it was all old hat. I mean, this was my second pregnancy.
Yeah, but I
Doing
knew
so
it like the
much
back of my hand.
And Steph, this is number 4. So, everything seemed just fine. So, Steph and I both have been involved with a youth camp, which is now called Camp Rise. Used to be Camp Indian Head. But Camp Rise was something that Steph was a part of when she was a kid. And then I became a part of it through some people. Doesn't matter. And we were both counselors there. I played guitar. I always wanted to go every year because it built me up so much in the faith. Shout out to Pastor Nate Abramson. He's an amazing pastor and very inspiring. And Pastor Burnt Twite, who both did such a great job with the kids there and inspired me. So I needed it for my faith because I wanted to see it from these children expressing their faith and getting a chance to really fuel up from them. And so Steph got to come with me and be a counselor there, which was awesome because that's kind of tying her past to her present and getting to be a part of it with me. And so we're both there. But you are 16 weeks pregnant, which is still... Is that second trimester or first trimester?
Yeah, it's trimester. It's a trimester. Definitely a trimester. It's second.
Second, okay. So we're moving there, but we're not third second. Trimester yet.
I don't even think I had like the tiniest little bump.
You did that, at least a bump. Yeah.
Might have been gas, but a little baby bump.
Yeah. So, she was still involved with, some of the athletics and stuff. And we actually got really scared because she was in a little bit of pain. Or maybe that was just
I was
when it all happened.
I was doing ultimate sports with the kids, and so I stepped funny, and I was like, oh, yeah, but you just pull a little muscle or something. It wasn't anything. So I was like, oh, I should really kind of simmer down a little. Yeah,
I am pregnant, so maybe I shouldn't be running around full speed. Anyway, so we're going along this camp. It's a week long. It was going fantastic. And this is from my perspective, what happened. So I'm obsessed with ultimate frisbee. And when I go to camp, I'm really excited to play with the kids. And it hurts my knees and I'm in pain for a couple of weeks, but I have a really hard time resisting the awesome chance to pretend I'm young again. And I'm doing that with the kids, and Steph was hanging out and talking to... You were somewhere else.
I was working.
You were working hard.
It's not a coffee break. I don't know what I was doing.
So... I'm playing this game super intense, super sweaty, and one of the other counselors comes running over, and I'm not saying that she can't run, but this was the first time I've seen her run, and full speed, running at me, so something's wrong. And I don't mean that as an insult, but it's just
not run.
You just didn't expect this, because she would, watch the games and not play the games. That was just anyway.
You're digging a hole here.
It's getting worse. She comes running up and she's like, Titus, you need to get your key, get your car, and pick up your wife. She needs you and you take her to a hospital right away. And maybe she said, she's bleeding. Oh gosh. Full speed sprint to the cabin. Where's the key? Where's the key? Where's the key? Grab the key, get in the car, drive over to where she said my wife was by kind of the pavilion area. And then you were crying and got in the car. And I don't know if Patty told me more at that point or if we just got in, you explained it on the way. I think she might have just said,
there really wasn't anything to contribute. Yeah.
Started bleeding. And obviously when you're pregnant, that's very concerning. And we got in the car to drive to the hospital, which was about 55 minutes to the decent sized hospital close to us. That
Pure
actually
silence,
had
because
it.
this whole time we're thinking, we're about to lose this baby.
Yeah, we're both, the unspoken thing is like, this is probably a miscarriage, and that's heartbreaking because everything was fine. And I think Steph's feeling guilt, like I did it because I was playing this game and we were here at camp. Why am I here?
The thoughts in my head, the whole ride there was, if I didn't come to camp, like, and not even if I didn't play the, like, I should have just stayed home from camp. That was an option. I didn't have to come. Everything would be fine. So I'm like second guessing everything I'm doing.
Absolutely. So you're crying, and I could feel that too, but what do you say? You know, like, because you know it's not her fault. You can't predict those things. Again, we don't know what's going to do what, but we were terrified and just emotional. We get to the ER, and if you've ever been to the ER in the middle of the night, you may not have had the best experiences. We can relate. And I'll explain why. So we get into this ER room, and first came the nurse, right? Mm-hmm. And like right away, we explained what's going on. They rushed us in there, and right away she got an ultrasound machine. And because we were just like, did we lose a baby? Did we lose a baby? Did we lose a baby? And she was pregnant too. So she's concerned, like, oh, I understand. Like, she's great with child. Was probably 8 or 9 months pregnant. And then we're basically holding our breath until she gets it going, and we hear the heartbeat.
And we see the baby is alive on the ultrasound thingy.
Okay. That's right. I didn't remember if
she
we
had like
saw it
a
or
little
not.
mini version of an ultrasound. It was just a very... But
Okay.
yes. So we confirmed, okay, baby's still alive.
Which was awesome. In enters the emergency doctor and comes in, kind of like, you know, what are we dealing with here? Like, and explaining, yeah, that was bleeding and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, I probably had a miscarriage. Just lays
Matter
it out.
of fact, yeah, well, you probably had a miscarriage.
And stuff's like, we just heard the heartbeat on the
Literally,
monitor.
like, well, just an update, doctor. So, like, we saw the baby still alive. I don't know if you communicate with your nurses around here.
And the nurse, who is also great with child, standing behind him, is just like, looks aghast. She's like, I cannot believe
Are you stupid?
He just said that. Like, even if that was true, that is not how you would break that to someone. And it was just without tact. And so, like, it was just very painful. And then he looks at either the ultrasound, and he looks at it, and then
he goes away and comes back.
Yeah. There's a lot of time here. I think we were there for 3 hours. And when he comes back, he says, okay, I looked at the images, and I see a very concerning dark thing, basically. And it's probably cancer. Like, and again, if you've been involved with cancer, you know you're very careful with that word.
And no emotion when he said it. It's like, it's probably cancer. You need to follow up with your OB. He also said, I'll let your OB know. I'm going to, put in a little message to her. But yeah, call her on Monday. This was on Thursday. And we are going back to camp. And, call your doctor tomorrow or Monday. Like, okay, yeah, just follow up with your doctor.
No big deal.
With your cancer issues.
I guess you didn't miscarriage, but you definitely got cancer, so...
Probably going to die.
Whenever you can get that scheduled, it's not a big deal. So, like, that night was so crazy, but we were thankful. I mean, besides the pain of that, I think we were thankful because the baby was alive.
Yep.
And because I just remember getting back and, like, letting people know at camp what was going on, that it was okay. Mm-hmm. And they try to keep the kids calm because we had a previous situation the year before where everyone freaked out because we talked too much about something going on, and everyone went crazy.
So let's move on.
Yeah.
That was a lot of details.
I know, but it was a cool story.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's weird thinking about those feelings.
But that became a big road of fear.
So that was the start of it, right? We were just literally like a bolus of fear. Yeah, that's how it started. So fast forward, we go back to camp. That was a Thursday night. We go back to camp. It's Friday. And that morning, of course, the campers are going to have breakfast, a little devotion, and we're going to pack up and go home. So, woohoo, we get to go home. Monday rolls around, and I'm like, I'm going to call my doctor. But my doctor calls me and says, I just happened to look at your chart, and there was an ultrasound picture on there. And that does not look good. And I'm like, wait. You just happened to go through my chart. I'm like, wait a minute. You didn't get a message from the ER doctor because I have cancer. Did you know that? And she's like, no, he never contacted me. I'm like, of course he didn't. Of course he didn't. Because he is the middle of the night doctor that nobody wants to work with. So they put him in the middle of the night so no one has to actually see that he works there. So she had no idea. She just happenstance to see it. And anyways, she's like, this is really concerning, and
right away.
like we need to just take a look at this. And she was giving me enough to know that it was serious, but she was still, the bedside manner was like night and day compared to
She's like,
the ER.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
Like,
let's figure this out. We're gonna do this. So we go in, and she sets us up with a specialist. Blah blah blah. We go see the specialist. And I had already Googled everything. And in my mind, did I not say, this has got to be a twin molar pregnancy with a coexisting fetus? I said that before we went in. Because when we went into this specialist, they had an ultrasound.
Right.
And she had her, she was very smart. And she saw it and she's like, oh my gosh, I think that is a molar pregnancy. And not just a molar pregnancy, that is a twin molar pregnancy with a coexisting fetus. So real quick, because this is kind of important, molar pregnancies are really common. It's where the egg doesn't fertilize correctly and it just turns into a mass of cells. So basically like a little tumor inside of your uterus. Okay, that does happen. And sometimes it like half forms, but you know, it's not like living. It's literally like a tumor. This was a twin pregnancy. So one of the eggs did not fertilize correctly, so it did turn into a molar. We called it Mo. And then there was the living baby with it, the twin, and they were in the same sack. So we had the mole and the twin fighting over all the nutrients, everything. And the mole was growing just like the baby was growing. That's what we had. And down the road we confirmed that's what it was. So
do you remember what the statistics are on how rare that was? Just to give a perspective on how, like, the specialist was kind of, just flabbergasted. Like, I know what this is, but like I've never had this situation, and like it's so rare that you maybe would see 3 of these in the country.
Right, and they're mostly out of the country. For some reason, it's really prevalent in like African American in Africa.
Yeah.
Or no, India.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, she said that it's so rare. Not only have I never seen it, but after you, I probably never will see it again.
Yeah.
It's
like
so rare.
That's how.
And throughout the pregnancy, she literally had to let surrounding hospitals know that I was quote unquote out there in case they ever had to treat me. That's how rare it was. And it's definitely, we'll talk more about this later, but it's even more rare that you give birth to that coexisting fetus, the living baby, because you can have them, but you'll miscarry. It just doesn't happen. We'll talk about more of that.
Do you want to say a little bit of it? Because then she had a conversation with us based on some of that information.
I get it.
Okay. Yep. Sorry.
There's like a method to my madness.
Okay.
More madness than method. Go method.
Go method.
Okay, so we're in this room and she's telling us about it. But then she gets like into the serious business. This is what it is, and here are the things that can go wrong. So first of all, it's very unlikely that the baby will even make it. Like 16 weeks is like super, it's like, wow, you even made it this far. Usually you miscarry before the first trimester or at the first trimester. So you're here, it's like you might make it a little longer. Most likely you're not going to, you're going to miscarry. But even beyond that, though, it's super dangerous. Your thyroid, it can wreak havoc on your thyroid, your blood pressure, preeclampsia, even before 20 weeks, which is usually where you start monitoring that or thinking about it in your brain a little bit. But for me, it was like even in your like first and second trimester, it can give you preeclampsia, which is, it could be deadly if you don't notice it right away. It's like the silent killer, they call it, because you don't have symptoms normally. You can hemorrhage, so like it could just like disconnect or just bump it or whatever. You can just bleed out and hemorrhage and die. But
And that's because the mass or Mo was attached to the uterine wall.
Correct.
And every time that moved, it caused bleeding.
Hence the bleeding.
Yep.
Absolutely. The other thing is the baby would, even if you did give birth to a baby, it won't, the baby will suffer and die. You're going to give birth to the baby and there'll be defects for sure, like bodily, mentally, all the defects. So it was just very, very not okay.
And the HCG levels?
Cancer. The HCG levels don't go down, and then you have to see an oncologist right away because cancer is also something that you sometimes develop during the pregnancy, but usually it'll show itself after the pregnancy. And karyocarcinoma is something very hard to fight, so that's something you have to think about. So anyways, I actually suggest in this case that you terminate the pregnancy now.
This is what the specialist says after giving us all this info.
And right away, I mean, Titus and I are like,
we looked at each other and just knew.
And we're like, okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to go along with it. Now, just pause there for a second because I think of myself and like, I know what God tells me and I know where I stand and I know my foundation. But when it comes down to it, when there's a hard choice like that, like I might die. Am I gonna listen to what God says and promises me because it's good? He promises that it's good. In my mind today, I'd be like, I don't know if I could do that because I'm sinful. And my natural desire is to follow what I feel is the best. And I usually feel I need to protect myself or protect whoever's involved. But in that case, in that room, this is what I mean about bolus of Holy Spirit. We didn't even think about it. We didn't talk about it. Titus didn't, need to pull me aside and like beg me
hey,
one way or the other. Let's talk about it. Nope, we just literally said, well, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, and which blows my mind too when I think about it because
that confidence.
I am so concerned about Steph all the time. Like that's my instinct is about her and her and so that I didn't freak out just with all these risks for her and her life kind of taking over. We both just kind of knew this is something we're going to have to walk through. Yeah. And go day by day, make choices based on that. But for us, and this is kind of how we responded, is like, we can't do that because this is our baby. And so at least we need to come at this where there's a life there. There's my wonderful wife's life and the challenges are going to come, but we love both of these lives and we want to care for them. And that's a scriptural understanding, like for us, that life begins at conception. So this little baby, while it's called in this diagnosis, coexisting fetus, it's a coexisting life that's alive in the womb. And so that baby's at risk as well as mom. And we don't know about these defects. And even if there are, we want to love this baby no matter what happens. And that's just the way it is. It's like when you have that biblical worldview, that's the way it is. And it is scary. But God gave us a bolus of faith for that moment and for all of the moments to come.
And there's way more. There's so many boluses that we got through this pregnancy.
Great. Now we got to call this bolus of faith.
Yep, that's
going to be the name of this episode.
Thanks, guys. Good talk. I'm glad you helped us out with that. So moving on. So that was at 16 weeks pregnant. 17-ish is about when we, met with the specialist and got it. Okay. So mission confirmed. We know what we're doing. We know what we're working with. So now it's like, go home and we'll see you all through the pregnancy. We'll see you
every week.
We'll see you next week.
Twice a week.
If you're still here. That's if you're still here or if you're still pregnant or, we'll see you next week if.
But anything happens, you come in and mind you, we live 45 minutes away from Nina.
Which is the specialist where we were staying.
And where there's a children's hospital. So, as we get closer to viability, which was 21 weeks? 23?
So, viability was 23 weeks.
23.
So, let's talk about that. So, we go home. I pull out my calendar. And I still remember the date. August 6th.
Wow.
They said so after we met with the specialist, we went back to our OB. Phenomenal doctor. Even the specialist who was like, you should terminate. Once we said we're not, we went back to our OB and she's like, she didn't even really questioned. She's like, I see what she recommended. And she kind of like softly was talking to us about it. And we're like, yeah, we're going to go with it. And she's like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah, it was awesome.
We're doing this. Like, it was just so inspiring, and we needed that. It was like a breath of fresh air, and like, lady, I could spend all my days with you.
Is this, what was it, Women's Health? Is that what it was called? It was in...
Yeah, Women's Health, I think.
Okay.
Anyways,
I just wanted to... I like giving shout outs to the people that
Women's
did
Health
such a one thing, because it was amazing.
Amazing. Anyways, so we go back and we tell her, she sets a game plan. She tells us your first goal, like we had goals all the time. Our first goal was 20 weeks. And that is because once you reach 20 weeks, which was about 3.5 weeks from this point, because we had, 17 something, we're like, we need to go to 20, because by then that increases the likelihood that you will make it to viability by a lot. Don't remember the percentage, but you'll definitely, like, our first goal is 20 weeks. That's what we're going to cheer for. We're going to take baby steps. We're not going to cheer for, term, nothing like that. We're going to make it to 20 weeks. We're like, okay, pulled out my calendar, 20 weeks. And then the goal after that was 23. And really, like, that was ultimately the goal that we wanted, was August
for us,
6th,
right?
which is 23 weeks, because that's viability. And it seemed so far away with all of these scary, statistics and all of these things. I'm like, oh my goodness, 23 weeks. That is, let's see, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's 6 weeks from now.
Month and a half.
A month and a half. That was so far away, looking at my calendar.
And that's just for a chance. When we say viability, that's like a chance that baby can survive outside the womb.
So what that means, exactly. So what that means is if I went into labor, or if anything happened where they had to take the baby out of me fast because I was hemorrhaging or anything, unless we hit the 23 mark, they would make no life-saving actions for the baby.
Like they can't.
They wouldn't
even try.
They
right?
wouldn't
because
bring the baby to the NICU. That was their protocol, I guess.
It's all about like statistics. They're just like,
Yep.
This will be painful. We won't be able to do it, and everyone's going to be hurt. So we don't even consider it until this point.
Because I kind of pushed her on that, but yep, at 23 weeks is when we will actually perform life-saving performances or whatever.
And
so we're looking at 20 weeks. That's our first goal. We made it. Okay, now we just 3 more weeks, let's make it. And we're again looking at all these lists of things that every day could happen to me, and I'm like, in my mind, just naturally like, okay, like this could all happen, but my hope surpasses that list. And I think I even wrote that in my blog.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, during this whole time, well, was it that early? Yeah. Steph started, and this was good, like just writing out what was going on. Mainly because a lot of people were asking for updates, our friends and family, ever since camp. And so Steph started a blog called Miracle Babies Exist, because that was our understanding. Like, if this baby is born, it will be a miracle, because statistically, scientifically, this will not happen.
Yeah.
And so we believe that can happen. Mm-hmm. We're not demanding God do what we say. And yet we do believe it's possible, and we're going to trust him every day and take it one day at a time. And so she was kind of writing out her feelings and thoughts, and I think it's been not only, it was great for you, but others eventually would see that too.
So not only did we initially start the blog, because there was actually a reason I started the blog, and it wasn't because just to fill in our family so that we didn't have to explain things more than once. It was partly the reason, but here's the big reason why I did it. When we first found out about this, I spent more time crying for other moms than I did for myself, because anytime I would go on discussion boards, anytime I would look, everyone was always bullied. And I'm saying bullied not loosely here. These doctors do not give these moms very much wiggle room to say, no, I don't want to terminate. They are literally bullied into terminating. And then not only do you lose the faith and the hope in that having that baby, any chance at all, but you also, now these moms are sitting here on these discussion boards guilt-ridden because they did that.
And they didn't give it a chance.
They didn't give it any chance.
Because they didn't know anything else, because the expert in the room was telling them this is your only option. and then they go online and see that others did try.
Well, and that's the thing too. There's hardly any people who say that they do try because they're all bullied. So what my hope was with this blog is that I could, even if it all went sideways, at least I could be that one speck of inspiration or hope that would allow these moms to think, okay, I could do this if I wanted to.
It'll be difficult, but
it'll be a difficult
I'm
road.
not the only one who has tried.
Yes.
And there's hope.
And that's what I wanted. And I wanted to show them why and where that hope came from, because it wasn't for me. And I made that very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really good for me because it was almost like a meditation almost on God's word, because I read that blog once in a while now, and I'm like, where did these words come from?
Yeah.
I don't remember writing these. These are perfect. And I feel like I could read this as my daily devotion because it's exactly what God says he's going to do if you trust in him. And boy, did he do it.
Yeah. And I tell Steph this all the time, and maybe some of you have heard this, but as a pastor, when I write sermons, I say that all the time. A lot of times my written sermon is crap. But like when I get up there and start talking, a lot of the words that come out of my mouth, I'm not just saying that. Like the Holy Spirit took over and wrote that sermon.
You're like, I have no idea where that came from.
And
that was not what I wrote down.
Like, I don't even remember what I said because like it just happened. And it's a really surreal experience, and it freaks me out, and it's very scary because I don't always feel ready. And then like get done and so you're always like you're trusting in God to give you the words, even when I've prepared and done all this. And so for me, it was very awesome and cool that Steph experienced that. And I think you have since then, but especially like you can just read it in your own words. Because I would totally agree, like during this time, God gave Steph boluses of faith. And anyway, let's get on to the next part.
So this is where we get into the nitty gritty, because we finally reached 23 weeks, which is, if you remember, that was August 6th.
And there were several hemorrhage episodes before this.
Several
where
bloody
we had to rush
episodes
to the hospital in like the middle of the night. Lots of blood and fear, and we call a doctor, come in right away. And every time your heart is leaping and terrified. And so I just emotionally, it did go very up and down too in there, but you know, the faith was growing.
It certainly was, and never left us. The faith never left us. We still...
So, okay, here's where we're at. Let's just take it one moment at a time.
Today we're going to go to the hospital. But I want to read an excerpt because, okay, so at 23 weeks, that's viability. We're like, oh my goodness, we made it. Like, I no longer have to hear, if anything goes sideways tomorrow, there's nothing we can do. That was a big goal for us.
Just have to evacuate everything.
Yep. Now we get to try. Like, that was a huge, empowering moment. If something happens, they can get this baby out of me and we can try. We don't have to just give up. I remember thinking during that time, though, like, I'm gonna read two things, actually. I just decided.
Sure.
I'm gonna read this also. So this was on the day we turned viable. This is just an excerpt from it. It's not the whole thing, but I said, I no longer have to hear that if everything goes sideways tomorrow, there's nothing we can do for my baby boy or baby girl. We get to try now. We get to try to help him or her live. We get to try, but try is all we can do. And try is everything that we will do. But sometimes everything isn't enough. Sometimes babies and mamas enjoy perfect full-term pregnancies, and then everything goes sideways, and everyone gives it their all, and it's still not enough. Sometimes problems that quote-unquote shouldn't exist do. Sometimes the odds mean nothing. Sometimes, despite the deepest longings of our heart, we have to give back what is most precious to us. And so I sit here full of so much joy and hope and so many dreams and plans, but also knowing so many ways this could go so badly, and doing my best to hold all of these things at the same time, because they are all a part of me now. So I'm trying to give myself just enough grace to feel all of them and release all of them, knowing that this hope and this grace is not my own, but has been given to me freely by my Father, who gives every perfect gift. Like, how perfectly was that signed?
Yeah.
There's another excerpt I actually wrote right before that in a blog post while we're waiting for viability. And this was just like, remember at the end of last episode, we're like, there was a moment when it was just like, I am alive for another day. Mm-hmm. Like, I woke up in the morning. This is the excerpt. I found it. I actually wrote it in here. So here's just a little part of it, but it says, nothing I do will affect this molar, and if it wants to change this situation drastically, it will. How freeing this has been. How wonderful it is to wake up each morning that I am not in pain or bleeding and truly be grateful for this day. How often we take simply a new day for granted. This is another day I get to play with my boys. This is another day I get to sleep in my own bed and not a hospital bed. This is another day I get to be healthy, and this is another day I am here. Yes, there are so many worries and hurt in this world happening around me, but I am still here, and I still have purpose. God decided to use us again today. What a magnificent feeling this is. Wow, I want to wake up with that feeling every single day. I didn't realize that I actually talked about it. But I wrote that because leading up to that, it was so hard because I was afraid to lay a certain way in bed. I was afraid to walk and bump into the counter. Everything I did all day long was full of anxiety. Am I doing the right things? If God wants something to happen, he's going to make it happen. He's not going to make me bumping into the countertop be the end all game. Oh, Steph, you did it. You ruined my plan.
And this was
you slept on your left side.
And it started, in that first moment when you thought, playing that game was part of it. And then it was cool because your doctor actually said no, but in the end, wasn't that a good thing that you bled that day, because otherwise we would have never known and been able to start monitoring this and be more proactive, be prepared. So again, you see how God works through things where you can guilt yourself over terrible things, but yet whether it's good or bad, this is God's promise. I will use it for good.
Totally.
And yeah. And in that moment, in the middle of this crazy situation, Steph experiences the peace beyond understanding. And we wish we could hold on to that every moment. But when you get to taste that, even for a second, that's one of those heaven things. It's
hands down.
Wow. If
things you can't explain.
I could feel that all the time. Wow.
It's like a prescription drug that you got, and you're
right.
I can't explain why I feel like this, but it's great.
And there's no negatives.
No
there's
symptoms.
No coming out of it. There's no crying about it the next day. Your life's falling apart.
Or hangover.
Just a high for.
It's just a God-given high. Yeah, it is. So the reason I stopped at 23 weeks is because the week after that, I won't go into too many details because there were some things and hiccups.
Where were you at this point? Is that what this is getting into?
Yeah, so we were by 23 weeks, because of all the bleeding, we were preparing ourselves for possible stay, but also possible birth at any time. So we scheduled a bolus of magnesium, which is a hospital stay overnight, and they give me a big IV bag full of magnesium at one time, and
which helps the baby, right?
Helps the baby's brain develop. They gave me some steroids. All of that for the brain, the strength, because it could happen anytime.
Which she called the bag of death.
The bag of death. I called the bag of death.
That's
because honestly, just an FYI, if you ever get a bag of magnesium, just know.
It's great. Don't worry about it.
It's wonderful. You can take all your clothes off and you won't care who sees.
Because your skin's on fire and you hate your life. But
your pride goes right out the window.
Nothing matters.
Yeah, but I made it. And if you know me, you know that I have a fear. I have a phobia, a literal phobia of puke. I cannot puke. If I feel even a little nauseous, I will have a panic attack.
That's ridiculous. It doesn't matter what else is going on.
Doesn't matter if someone's dying.
All that matters.
If they're puking, I'm on the other side of the house in the closet with my ears plugged, fingers in my ear. I do it when my kids are dying. When my kids are puking.
Hopefully they're not dying. Yes, she
you
runs away.
You haven't died yet.
And I've always wondered what she did when I wasn't in the picture. But
Legit,
now she
under
disappears
your clothes.
and Titus, please take care of it.
Yeah, I'm crawled up in a curl.
Tell me when it's done.
Fetal position in the
And
closet.
you've cleaned up everything and doesn't smell. I
Yep.
can't. No trace. Which is hard when one of your kids pukes next to your bed.
When you have the biohazard service come in and clean, let me know. I will come out when they are gone.
Yeah.
Maybe after an hour when the scent is gone.
Yeah.
So that happened knowing that I could be nauseous, and I made it through the bolus bag.
It's a big deal.
That was a big deal. I know for you it's like...
But that kind of ties
Would be.
into you being very careful at home, not wanting to bump it, because you really didn't want to go into the hospital.
did not want to
You
go
wanted
to
to
the
stay
hospital.
home, be with your family, avoid that as long as possible. But
Didn't want an
more
early
and more,
birth.
your doctor's like, this is getting riskier and riskier. As the baby gets bigger, the mass is getting bigger at the same time. You're bleeding more often, and you're 45 minutes away from the hospital. If you start hemorrhaging, there's a good chance you will die.
It's
so starting
stubborn.
to get to the point where you're putting your life at risk unnecessarily.
Yes. Because there was a point.
I felt that too.
Yeah, I know you
So.
did. He was so frustrated with me. I was so stubborn. There was a point when I bled
Oh my gosh.
badly, went
I
in,
remember. No.
and actually one of her colleagues helped me, and he's like, he was really like, our doctor played it cool, but he's like showed a little bit more of the fear. Because if I was to give birth with him, he wouldn't feel comfortable, even though he knew he could do it. He even said, I could do this, but I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable. So I bled, went to the hospital. He was on call. It was our doctor's coworker. They're like, work together. And he's like, yeah, you really should be admitted. Well, it turns out I had an OB appointment that next day. And I was literally making deals with the doctor at this appointment because I was so stubborn. She's like, Steph, we knew that this time was coming. It was a possibility all along that you could be hospitalized until you give birth. Now's the time. And I'm telling you, today I would like to admit you. And this was at 34 weeks. 33 weeks. 23 weeks. Jeepers. It was
Just past viability.
Yep, it was just
and
at viability.
24.
She's like 23 weeks. She's like, now's the time. And I'm like, no, like, I am pretty fine. So I literally,
stubborn.
we sat there going back and forth. So finally I'm like, just let me go home and get my affairs in order. Give me a week. She's like, all right, I'll give you a week. And she did. She gave me a week. I went home. Turns out 1 day short of a week, I bled. And that day they're like, we're done.
Let's be fully honest. So in between there was 2 bleeding episodes. The first one,
Oh, yeah.
you started bleeding and I drove you all the way to the hospital and I had all the kids in the car with us because you had gone through this. And we got to the hospital and she begged me because she's like, I feel better now. I'm fine. Like, I stopped bleeding. It's no big deal.
My tummy is gone.
You begged me not to admit you
Don't
at
make
that
me
moment.
go in there.
And we walked the halls of the hospital and then went back to the car. And I'm dealing with the guilt, like, did I just do my wife and my baby because I let her walk out of this hospital? We are in the building. And then we go to Hardee's and go home.
We did.
Because Hardee's was the only thing that could solve the issue right then.
But we did go back.
I think it was that next day.
Yeah, we did.
That's when you went in. Because I think we let her know that you bled again. And she's like,
Yes.
okay, tomorrow you need to come in.
Yes.
This is it. Get your change of clothes. No, that was it. That was the deal. I didn't admit you, but I made you call her.
Yeah.
And then she said, yes, go get clothes and then come back tomorrow. That's the deal. That was rough. Like, I will never forget that day. Because then I'm bearing this, like, I'm the man of the household. Is this one of those times where I need to override?
It's like you're
her?
dropping me off at rehab. Please don't make me go in there. So we go home, we get all our stuff, we go to Theta Clark the next day in Neenah. This is my favorite hospital. I gave birth to all my kids there. I was so excited that was where I was going to be because I love them. It's a community hospital. It's amazing. They have lots of specialists on board, and my doctor delivers
Steph
there.
finally has wrapped her head around.
Yes,
I'm
and
going
I finally
to be admitted.
Okay, great. I'm gonna do this.
45 minutes from home.
45.
We'll make this work somehow.
Titus can
Titus
see
will
me.
drive. Like,
So I get there, and they're being really sketchy. So they put us in this tiny room with a little single bed, but like no room for basically
All right,
anything.
this is going to be fun.
This is
for
a
while.
closet for however long.
And you can't leave the room.
Great, and I can't leave the room. Okay, this is gonna be good. But they're like, oh, we got bigger rooms. It was busy though. It was a lot of babies being born that day. So I'm like, okay, I'll move into a bigger room. This is fine. Well, no. The doctor comes in and is like, okay, we had a little conference and we actually don't feel comfortable with you here. It's just a little too much. So many things could go wrong, even if you made it to give birth.
I feel comfortable, but
right.
I'm like the only one.
But right, I'm the only one. Like if my colleagues were here and I wasn't, then they'd be so pissed at me.
And
I don't think she said that, but
and you wouldn't be
in
cared
good hands.
for as well as we would like.
We would like you to be in a university hospital. Was the end game. So off to.
So we want you to go to Freighter, which is in Milwaukee.
And I dropped to my knees mentally. I was so devastated. Over 2 hours from my family.
Me too.
Not only did I have to go to the hospital, but I had to be over 2 hours from my family. I'm never going to see them until who knows when.
And how is Titus going to come see me?
Yeah.
He's a pastor.
What if something happens? He's not going
to be there.
Have to be, over 2 hours. So that was stressful. So finally we sucked it up. I got a very fancy ride to Freighter in an ambulance.
Ty's a year old.
Ty's a year old.
Little boy.
And I have the boys and they're in school and it's just like, oh my gosh. So we get to Freighter and all night long, all of these specialists, the cancer doctor, what is that called? The oncologist, the nurses, the doctors, like they're getting like the full scope of everything. I just was like, holy crap. Before I went to bed that night, I'm like, I am in good hands. Like they were on top of everything when I got to Freighter.
Yeah, you got the glorious ambulance ride all the way down.
Well, that
and then
too,
I came just after. And
yeah, not only did I get the glorious ride, but they also had all of my blood.
Oh yeah, that was why. Because I was
me.
like, I can just drive her down there. And they're like, no, because that way we have blood on hand, and then if the ride itself causes any issues, we can administer blood, and she'll be okay until we can operate or whatever.
Yep, sat right next to my blood actually in the cooler down on the floor.
It's just nuts. And then came down there, but yeah, Steph's right. By the end of that night,
I was so thankful.
I was too.
That we were there.
And even though I was further, it was just like, this. They were absolutely right.
Yeah.
We have this huge team, 24/7. There's so many doctors here that are excited that Steph was here.
They were so excited.
They
telling
wanted
their friends that they have this case.
To have this case because they wanted the experience. Like, it's just a cool culture. And it's weird because a lot of these doctors are younger than me. We're younger than
so
me,
weird,
younger than Steph. Like, because they're in college and they have every level, like the top tier and then 5 other ones with them all the time at every stage of learning. And they're all involved getting this practical experience. It's really cool how a university hospital works. So we were very impressed and thankful. We were in good hands.
Totally. Then the next day, I even got to move to the floor of the long-term stays for OB. So all the baby mamas have their own little floor if they're kind of like on bed rest or whatever. So I go to that floor, and I get my room, and it was room number 8, I still remember. And I move in. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit because there were episodes throughout my stay there, lots of bleeding episodes. And whenever a bleeding episode would come, I would get really frustrated because that meant that I couldn't leave my room. And that was hard. They have my sanity, just so you know, this is like a mental health tip to anyone. I was alone in those 4 walls every day, all day long. That is really hard. And spoiler alert, I was there for 10 weeks, over 10 weeks after the birth of Maggie too. So 10 weeks until birth.
2.5 months.
2.5 months in 4 walls with a hospital bed. You have to do something to not lose your ever-loving mind. So every day I had a schedule. I would get up 7 a.m. I would shower. I would get ready, I would dress myself, and then I would make my bed because I am not allowed to lay in my bed, not even sit on it, other than they had to monitor me every morning.
This was Steph's schedule.
This was my schedule.
She was not allowed to lay in it. She decided.
Right, I decided that. I'm not allowed to lay in my bed because then I'll fall asleep and I won't sleep at night. So no bed. I would make it. I would clean the room, sanitize things. Everything would be done except the trash, which is all the housekeepers had to do. And then I would call my mom on her way to work. She wasn't retired then. So her and I would have a conversation. I would, sometimes while I'm talking to her, I would walk to get coffee because after my bed was made, I was allowed to go get a cup of coffee down the hallway. This was really exciting. I got out of my room, walked to the little lobby of our little area, got a cup of coffee and walked back. I was like, oh, I'm out of the room, even though it was like 6 minutes. And get back to my room, sit down, and then I would, throughout the day I had a schedule. I would scrapbook during this time. I made an awesome scrapbook in those 10 weeks. And then I would do a puzzle. I had a cake puzzle. And then I would always, there was other things throughout the day, but then towards the evening, I was so excited because I would go get a Pop-Tart from the vending machine, and I would watch it with a Halloween movie, or like, because it was getting to the fall, so I would watch like a fall Hallmark movie. 2 p.m. during the day, I would have lunch about 1 p.m. and then I would watch my Hallmark movie from 2 to 3. So I had every hour of the day was scheduled out until I went to bed. It was amazing. So anyways, mental health, that was life-saving effort for me, was to make my bed in the morning and have a schedule so that my mind was never alone.
And meanwhile, I'm trying to survive.
He's at home with tying the toilet.
Yeah, I'll tell that story in a second. But we got the 3 boys. Oh yeah, that's right. And I got the 3 boys, bringing them to school, getting them ready, and they're driving all the way to New London. So I'm driving them half an hour there, back, get my work done, do this, and then I pretty much every week was able to go see you twice.
Yes. I saw the boys twice my whole 10 weeks.
Yeah, so normally it was just me because they didn't allow any kids to stay in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So I could stay in the room with her, but that meant I had to pass off the children somehow, and they had to take care of school schedules and stuff, so that was difficult. But Steph's parents and others really helped during this time. The congregation was wonderful. They brought so much food. They were so supportive and caring and loving. A lot of gift cards for gas and food. So we were well taken care of and loved.
Literally.
It was amazing.
More taken care of. Like, we had less to worry about in this awful time than when everything was perfect.
Absolutely.
Like, that's how God provides.
Than I ever have.
He ate better. Like, I was like,
I brought her food.
Okay, congregation. Like, my husband's not going to want me to come back.
Yeah, that was a comment a couple times.
If I die, he's going to get, like, endless doorstep lasagnas.
Yeah, and it was a crazy time, too, because we had done a building expansion, and right in the middle of this was our dedication. So and I had been very involved. Steph teased me about it because I'd be gone. It was like, this was your other...
It was his other woman.
Yeah, woman. You'd be meeting with Butch, the MGI.
His other woman was named Butch.
He was a guy who was getting close to retirement. This was one of his last projects. He was just awesome. I love the guy, and would go over and talk to him about every detail about the building because I was really excited about it. And then finally the dedication happens, and that day you went into the delivery room because you started bleeding, but your mom was there and your aunt was there. Yeah. And I'm going into the service knowing that's where she is.
Yeah, like they're like, at that point they're like, we might deliver today. And you are like heading into a dedication service with your brother Julius. And
your mom was like, no, you stay and do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. I'm here. It's fine. And that was another trust God moment. Yep. Like, okay, I can't be next to my wife right now, but this is what I'm called to do. I'm going to trust that the Lord's going to take care of it. I can't change this anyways.
Even if you're
it's
there.
It's not in my hands. Yep. My brother was there, and he had said, like, I could take over the service if I have to. But it was probably Steph's mom who really convinced, just like, we got this, do what you need to do, and come when you're done. And somehow I preached a sermon that day. I kept it all together, and I left as soon as the service was done.
And I bought my way back.
Yeah, she bought her way back down and didn't deliver that day. So by the time I got there, she was back in a room,
Yeah.
not down to her floor yet, and she was fine.
I was like, the whole time they're like, we're about ready to just deliver you. And I'm like, no, I don't want to lose my room.
And my husband's not here. And...
I'm not ready yet. Oh my gosh, I was so stubborn. So we talk about this child
This is normal. This is not just this, but it was just in this situation she was also stubborn.
Don't tell me I'm going to the hospital. Like, the only time you got me to go to the hospital other than that was when I had a seizure. Because that was only because I was not coherent.
Yeah, like she's unconscious. So, of course, I could make the decision for once.
Anyways, yeah, so that we had episodes like that constantly. That one was a scary one because they were actually like threatening me with like delivering. Yeah. I say threatening because I really didn't want to. I'm like, no, I can suck this baby in a little longer. I really wanted to make it close to term as possible.
Yeah. And you were losing blood, so that was part of it too.
That was part of it. Yep. They were like, we need to...
Blood level count was low.
Yeah, check, blood infusions, all of that. Well, anyways, I made it back to my room. I was very, very... I was very territorial of my room because it was clean. And I'm kind of a mess. Like, I'm kind of a germaphobe in that way. Like, I don't want to shower in someone's shower that I don't know. Hotel showers freak me out, beds. And it was like, my germs were all over that shower. The nurse's new roommate was me, and we were like family. All the staff would come into my room at night, and we'd watch Sugar Crush, the baking shows. And we were just a family. It was like, that was my place. Yep. That's where my sanity was. That was the one thing I could hold on to was my room. Do not deliver this baby. Do not keep me here any longer because I will lose my room if another patient comes in. They will pack my stuff up. I'll be homeless. So I fought my way back. I think it was either that day or the next day. Maybe that night. Yeah, that night, my favorite nurse came and got me and said, you get to come home. So I went back to my room. Anyways, we had those episodes quite a bit. Throughout this stay, just to kind of move us along, throughout this day, there was a lot of times when doctors would come in and, every morning at crack of dawn, the doctor would come in who was on staff that day and do a check-in with me. And then my doctor would also come in once in a while. My university doctor who was going to give birth would come in and explain things. And they had a conference one day. And I remember she came in, a few of them came in and just gave me the news that, like, just so you know, we might have to do a hysterectomy, most likely. We're just going to plan on it because birth is going to be really scary. Like, right now we're doing great, but the birth is even going to be scarier because that's when the bleeding won't stop because we are going to have to move the molar. And so hysterectomy, they also told me that, you're not going to be in labor and delivery when you give birth for surgery. You're going to have to go to the actual hospital and in the OR. So they were laying all of these things as we're nearing birth. They made a game plan, like, you're doing great. We're going to let you keep going as long as you do great. Until 34 weeks. We are not going past 34 weeks. Just the way the molar was growing faster than the baby. 34 weeks was like the cutoff. So
that's when it'll cross that boundary where it'll be dangerous for the baby and you.
Yeah. More than it already was. Yeah. So the cutoff was November 14th. They scheduled my OR. They booked the OR and they had the birth of our baby scheduled. So it was like a roller coaster all of those weeks. In the end, I made it to 34 weeks, and it was a battle. It was a battle of losing my out-of-room privileges because of bleeding episodes. It was a mental battle, like eating my lunch in silence, staring at the wall, and then I just start crying because I'm like, this sucks. Haven't seen my kids in weeks and weeks. I've only seen them twice. I had spent both of their birthdays in the hospital. Jackson had to open his gifts in the bathroom because Ty was sleeping on my hospital bed. It was just like, when you're in that moment, like, all of these things.
I'm missing all these
things. Anyways, we had a lot of miraculous, like, faith-given moments throughout those weeks. Finally, the day of the surgery comes. Like, oh my goodness, we made it. It was just by happenstance that Titus's dad Tim was in town. So
in Milwaukee for
in
meetings.
Milwaukee for meetings on that day. So of course he comes. He comes and hangs out in my room while we're waiting to go to the OR that morning for surgery. It was beautiful. It was awesome. I was leading up to the surgery super nervous because the week of, all of these doctors came into my room and just sat me down and seriously had a conversation with me about the surgery. They're like, we need to let you, like, this is serious. And they're like, this might happen. You and Titus might both miss the birth because we might have to knock you out. You may not make it. The baby, we're not promising, anything.
At first, I wasn't allowed to even be in there. So she fought for that.
I fought for that.
I want him in there. I need him in there.
And we had to, like, beg it was the anesthesiologist, really, that we had to beg. And finally got the okay for that. But there was a lot of things that they had to go through to let me know. And, of course, my one concern. Do you remember my one concern about surgery? I don't want to
get nauseous.
Yes. I was like, don't knock me out because I know I'm going to wake up and be nauseous.
That's all she cares about. Like, I'm going to be nauseous. Yeah, I might die, but just please make sure I have your whatever medicine you put in me just doesn't make me nauseous. That's all I care. Or give me something else for that because as long as I don't feel nauseous, I'll be fine. And that was everything. It's just crazy how much that phobia does even in this crazy situation.
It is a disease. So after those doctors told me that leading up to the surgery, I literally wrote out all the Bible passages about anything to do with anxiety, like give it to the Lord. And I read them and I memorized them. I actually read the Bible front to back, more than front to back, while I was in the hospital those 10 weeks. And I just filled myself with God's word, literally filled myself. And that fear and that anxiety just melted. The day of surgery came and I was just like, let's do this. Like, I was sarcastic with the nurses. I was having a good time and I didn't even have the drugs yet. We go into the room.
Gets even more loopy.
Yep. Well, right. I walk into the room and the room is filled with doctors.
There was a ton of people in there. It was a huge room.
Everyone was like, had their pen and paper because they were like,
students are in there because they're going to write a study on this and just
they're getting ready for a case study because this just is unheard of. And there's
multiple surgeons,
oncologists, and so many surgeons, and like students like watching me like I'm a piece of artwork. I was a piece of artwork, wasn't I?
A little bit.
I was. Draw me like your French models. That's what I should have said.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, we start surgery. Everything's fine.
Before they start, like, they got everything prepped, and I had to sit outside in a chair by myself.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you just wait here till we're ready for you because you're really not supposed to be in there, but we're going to let you in. It's a very special privilege, so just sit here. And where I'm sitting is, like, the hub where they tell all the doctors and nurses where to go. And, like, it's on the board, and there's all these people there, like, putting in the orders of which room and this, blah, 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 blah. So it's all this chaos, like, of people running each way.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'm just like, okay, how do I calm myself? Because I'm getting ready to maybe lose my wife, maybe lose the baby. We have no idea what's going to happen.
What did you do? Did you just pray? Or
I took out my phone, and I put it to the book of Luke. Started with chapter 1. I just started reading it.
Nice.
I was like, I just need God's word. I don't even know where to go.
That's awesome.
I'm just going to start reading.
I never actually asked you that question.
And I think I read maybe through chapter 4 or 5. I just kept reading. I was like, nothing else. I couldn't pray. I did.
Because you don't know the words to say.
I did pray. But at the same time, it was like, I feel so tense.
Yeah.
And God promises his word will help. So that's what I did. I just started reading it.
Did it help?
And I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I sat there, I felt reasonably calm, and I was like, it's out of my hands, and I'm just going to read my God's words. And just, it's like listening to something that comforts you, and I'm listening to the words of my God. It didn't matter what it was at that time. It was just remembering that he's there. Anyway, so then they called me in, and I sat next to her, and then she's all hooked up to everything, got things poked into your fingers and everywhere, and got the sheet up for C-section, and I'm sitting by her head and ready to go.
They had extra things because they had to track my pulse real time. It's like they said essentially it is real time on their monitor, but they needed like real time because if I was like going, they needed to know if I was going.
Yeah.
So Yeah, we're having surgery, and actually Magnolia came out first, right? It was so beautiful because all of a sudden, um, no issues, and Magnolia came out.
Deliver the baby. She's healthy, which is crazy.
Titus told me it was a girl, and I said he was lying.
Yeah.
Because I don't give birth to girls, I only give birth to boys.
Really, it's a girl. Like, don't you lie to me. I'm not lying to you. It's a girl.
After all of this, like, God, all of this, and you also gave me a girl.
And she's perfectly
what a
healthy,
gift! Like, I wanted
beautiful.
a girl so bad.
It was unbelievable. Like for both
of us. Little 4-pound Magnolia Rose Bilo.
And then they said, okay, Titus, you have the choice. Like, you can stay here or go with the baby because we're going to take the baby up to our NICU center.
Not yet.
Oh.
Because first, all of a sudden, I felt...
Before she was delivered, though.
Right. Before she was delivered. Let's back up a little. Before she was delivered, I just felt off. And I couldn't quite get my words out. And it's not that I was nauseous. I just felt like my body was shutting down. And I was trying to tell the doctor, like, I don't feel right. And he's like, oh, okay. So the anesthesiologist. So he's looking at my numbers, and my blood pressure, he said, was going way down. And I felt like I was dying. I felt like there was an elephant on my chest. My body was shutting down. I couldn't even get the words out. It's like when you're awake, but you're paralyzed and you can't talk, but you're trying to. That's how I felt. It was insane. Like, my body was caving in on itself. And then eventually it corrected, and I came back. So that was scary.
I saw that too. That was very frightening.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think I should leave her because this is scary. And after Maggie's delivered, it's not over because now it's like, okay, the baby's delivered. Now we need to get the molar out.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure it's completely out because, you don't want to leave anything foreign like that because that may cause cancer. So you're just very careful with that. Little note, they did decide not to do a hysterectomy because it would prolong the surgery and they knew how risky it would be. They actually decided that was not the best course of action because of the risks involved. So just leading into that.
Yeah.
So it was just to get this mass evacuated, everything else clean, and, check that. So there was still a lot of surgery to happen when Maggie came out. And so I was faced with like, okay, do I stay with my wife or go
with the baby?
And you told me, go with our baby.
Yeah.
They'll take care of me. Yeah. And again, then it's
because you can't do anything.
I can't do anything about this. Steph doesn't even really know I'm here at this point. You do, but you know I'm with her.
Yeah.
And that gives you comfort. And that's what you told me.
I needed her to have you
go
there,
and know that, then I know you're with her.
Yeah. So he does leave because I'm like, it's fine. Like, I almost died a second ago, but that's like over.
Yeah, I'm fine.
But
now,
did I die?
Whatever. Yeah.
So I do talk him into leaving, and he goes to be with his daughter. And they are getting the molar out. They actually got the molar out. Like, they're not done yet. They're still doing things. The doctor's like talking to me like, oh, I have the molar here. Were you in there when the molar came out? You were not yet. No, you weren't. She's like,
I thought I saw it. I saw it in person.
You saw it in person or a picture?
Yeah, no, I saw it in person.
Okay, so maybe you left right after that. They got the molar out. They weren't done yet. They were still like, they still had to scrape, and that was scary. But they brought the they must have showed you. But they
cluster
took
of grapes.
It literally looked like a cluster of grapes. The crazy thing is it was bigger than Magnolia.
It was huge. Weird.
It was so crazy, but that's because it was literally stealing nutrients from Maggie the whole time, to feed itself. So, which is also terrifying and why it's scary, because it's growing and growing and growing. And
I just remember them asking me, "Do you want to see it?" And I was like,
"Yeah, why not?
See what it looks like."
Yeah, I'll take a look. See. And they took a picture and showed me the picture. But, anyways, then he left. So while he's gone and they're still operating on me to like get all the stuff out, it happens again. My body starts shutting down and I feel like I'm dying. And this time I couldn't tell the doctor that I felt like I was dying, but all my numbers were dropping. Like the opposite of skyrocketing. They were just
plummeting.
Thank you. Plummeting. And I couldn't explain it. Felt like there was an elephant on my chest. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. Like I felt it, couldn't say it. A little bit, it felt like eternity. I was back up. My levels came back up. My blood pressure came back up. My pulse came back up. It was just so weird. And the whole time they're like, yeah, I don't know. So they sew me up, literally could not believe it. And the doctor was over by me, the surgeon, the one delivering, she came over to me. She's like, Steph, you're not going to believe this. You bled more during one of your episodes during pregnancy than you did during this delivery, which they literally took a tumor out, which I was supposed to hemorrhage from. She's like, you bled more during during your episode than you did during this, cutting you open, taking a baby out, and taking a tumor out that caused all the bleeding in the first place. So that night, I don't get to see Magnolia, but my wonderful nurses knew how much I loved cupcakes, so they brought me a birthday cupcake in the recovery room. It was great. And the next day, I'm back in my room, and my doctor comes and sees me, and the delivery doctor. And she's like, so there are a couple things I want to talk to you about. She's like, we are doing a case study on you. You already knew this for the twin molar pregnancy, because that is just a crazy phenomenon that we don't ever see, especially one that gives birth to a healthy baby, and you are still living also. 2.
So we want to do a study, and we're like, absolutely, because anything that shows that there's chances that this will happen, we're going to do.
Yeah. You have our blessing. She's like, I'm also going to do another study on you. She's like, during that operation, you had a amniotic fluid embolism. And if you don't know what it is, it's where, from what I understood from her, is that some of your amniotic fluid gets in your veins, your blood vessels, bloodstream, and it's deadly. It just
goes straight to your heart.
It goes straight to your heart, and you die. It's literally death. You die.
Like, we don't even talk about this because
we don't get to do case studies on this because you don't live. You get one, you die. And not only did you have one, you had 2 during that surgery. When I felt like I was dying, that was an amniotic fluid embolism. 2 of them.
Mm-hmm. So not only did she not bleed much at all, which is ridiculous with the level of surgery, but then she has 2 of these life-ending things happen to her, and they didn't kill her. On top of this, the whole situation being impossible statistically speaking. So at this point, like, we don't even know what to say anymore. You know, it's just like, well, yeah, why wouldn't we expect this at this point? Because obviously God does what he wants.
Yeah. Anything we do, say, it's going to go his way.
Nurses were very Christian. Mm-hmm. And so for them, it was, it
was easy for them to understand.
Exactly. They just like, yeah, it's a miracle.
And others are like, that's
shaken.
Weird.
Yeah.
Shaken. Shaken's a good word. They were shaken.
You almost have to let it go because it's like, I can't think about this too long because
it breaks my brain.
Exactly. And I'm not ready to think about what that means. Mm-hmm. With so many people go through that, and then they just don't want to think about it because it's like, okay, then I have to think about what God is, and I'm not ready for that, and I don't know, and I'm scared.
Yeah.
And they turn it off.
Yep. It has to make scientific sense. It has to make worldly sense, or I don't want to be a part of it. But you can't fight.
This is the childlike faith thing.
What's black and white? Exactly.
Back to the same topic. It's like we think we're past the childlike faith because we're like, well, we've gotten everything figured out and we got our parameters. We know what's supposed to happen. So a lot of people will say, I moved past my faith when I was a kid when, like I just believed it because my parents told me. And then I got smarter and I figured all this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And then you get to moments like this where you had it so figured out, but it doesn't make sense. And then you run away from the childlike faith that's right in front of you because you can't explain it. And you don't want to be back in a situation where you're dependent on something or someone you don't know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people run away from that. I was just talking to, someone who's about to join our church about that. And we were both just marveling because she's she's got a background in nursing, and we were talking about just medical stuff and everyone thinking they know, but how it's easy for her to see the hand of God in everything. But a lot of people turn away from that. And I just said, like, whether you say you're an atheist or whatever, there's always a reason behind the reason why you refuse to acknowledge that you don't know everything. Yeah. And normally it's because you're afraid or trauma or something.
You also want to be smarter than God.
Yeah.
You don't want a God that knows better.
You don't want to be a kid. You want to be the adult and know everything. And
Yep. Anyway. So after that, we're expecting Magnolia to have some defects. She didn't. She had this really funky looking eye that at first we're like, ooh. But it was just we found out, they were worried at first because they're like, because of everything, we're going to check it out. It was literally a clogged tear duct or something and went away on its own.
I thought it was like a cancer spot and she was going to have the cancer in her because of all of this stuff. And that was what I was thinking immediately.
Because it looked like a little tumor on her eye. Nope. So here's a really cool thing. She was born at 34 weeks. She was 4 pounds. She didn't need a NICU stay. She was in the nursery where they monitor, and they kept her for 6 days as a precaution. She didn't need to be monitored. She just stayed there as a precaution. Wow. I was actually able to go home.
I told her to go home right away.
They told me, don't stay. Your husband can stay with Magnolia. You go home. You've been here for 10 weeks. Go home, sleep in your bed, get rest because you're about to have a newborn home. Just go home. And I listened to them. I did go home. I did come back at least once, I think, to visit, but maybe not. No, they let me stay there. They let me stay there for a couple days. And then I went home and you came back and got her eventually. It's frustrating waiting for them to say you can go home.
And just to put everything in perspective, we've talked about how wonderfully faithful we were during this time. Just so you understand, like, there are absolute moments of despair and crying and distress and pain. To give you an example of how ridiculous that can be, like just like the Israelites, you have all of this like amazing stuff happen. I have a healthy baby, I have a healthy wife at home, and it's the day that Magnolia gets to come home at 5 days because they said 5 was a mandatory day. So I go down there at 5, and I was down like I think every day.
Yeah.
But I went down, so this is 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And it's like, this is the day. Everything going well. I'm going to get to take her home. And they tell me that she can't come home that day. And I am pissed. I am mad.
So mad.
I call Steph. I'm just so angry that they will not let me take my daughter home. And then, you got 2 hours to drive home, and I'm bawling my eyes out. And I'm like,
fuming.
But then by the time I get home, I'm like, I'm so stupid. I'm here, like, so mad about this. And I have a beautifully healthy baby. I'm like, how do I get to this point?
Because the doctors want to just be extra sure. Like, I am so... We were like, the selfishness comes right back. It's just our nature.
Yeah, we get these 10 weeks of this beautiful faith growing moment.
Satan's like, okay, now I know how to get at him.
You can get distracted so easily and get angry so quickly about something. Just talked about that in the sermon today. Like, we're entitled. You get so entitled, even of God giving you things. And then it's like, gosh, just check your heart. Next day I go back and I do get to bring her home. And I'm terrified the whole way because she is like 3-4 inches long. It feels like maybe it was 6 or 7. And this tiny little 4-pound baby in the car seat, she like barely is a...
She looks like a puddle in the crevice.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
It's not safe.
When this baby is rear facing, I'm driving the car and it's just me and I can't hear her breathe and I'm freaking out. So I stopped like 5-6 times just to check and make sure she was breathing because I had this tiny little baby. And now I'm scared. Now I'm like, why was I so quick to get her out of there? She's tiny. Like, I can't take care of this baby. And she should have stayed there for another 5 weeks because if I mess this up now, those are all the things going through my head. But she finally comes home. And it's our miracle. And then like all of it sets in on just reality. So there's hard times there that come in, like the reality after having a faith moment. As you know, there's mountains and valleys. And that was something Steph and I would have to go through. And yet in that moment, just the joy. And I would say it was just culminated in getting her baptized. And having our sponsors, Nate and Aaron Moldenhauer, there, this tiny little baby, our congregation that supported us this whole time, and God makes her his child. He washes away her sins. He promises to care for her for the rest of her life. I mean, talk about peace. He gave us this child to care for by his grace. Could have been in his wisdom to take her home before that ever happened, and that would have been good too. As hard as that is to say, we were prepared for that. We actually expected that. But now we have this little girl in our arms, and God has connected her to Jesus and everything he's done through baptism, put his name on her, adopted her as his child, just like he had done for us. And we get this beautiful privilege to have our wonderful Magnolia Rose Bilo in front of us. And now she's about 5 years old, and we just cannot believe, still to this day,
No, I look at her all the time,
that she's here.
There was a lot of times in the hospital where I read Job, and it was just like he got everything taken away from him, his children, his land, like everything. He was so rich and he was so faithful, and the devil's like, take it away. He's not gonna keep that faithfulness. He's faithful. Of course, he has everything. He takes it away, and God's like, okay, you can. I'll let you do that, and he's still gonna be faithful to me. And sure enough, he took everything from Job. Well, everything in quotes. His riches, his family, saved his wife, of course, but
His health.
He was sick. He had friends come and mourn with him for days, a week, I think, and like all of this terrible stuff. And he was
and
just
start to accuse him of evil. Yeah.
Yep. But he right away, what did he do? He fell to his knees and said, like, God, you giveth and you take away.
May the name of the Lord be praised.
May the name of the Lord be praised. And like, that's what I was setting myself up for. Because I'm like, my kids that are living right now with me, that I have been so blessed to raise to this day, they are not mine. They are yours. And I am just so blessed to have them today. And that is a gift. It is not mine. It is not, I am not the ruler, and I am not their keeper. I am their mother. And that is a gift that I am so thankful for, that he could take back home with him whenever he felt it was good timing. And
there's no guarantee. I don't deserve this. I
don't earn it.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that God is punishing me if he shortens the normal life expectancy time. In his wisdom, he knows it's better. Which I know it's very hard to think through.
And then here we are at home with our little girl. We go to Thanksgiving that first week at my mom's, and it's not like a big party. We didn't take her out to a big party. It was just literally at my mom's house, but my brother and my sister-in-law came over too. And then we find out while we're there that my niece has mono. And my heart sank.
RSV or something like that. It was something more like...
It was mono.
Oh, okay.
But either way, it's contagious. And I'm like, I have this 4-pound baby. My heart drops. We've been there for a while already. Heart drops. We get home that night.
Oh, we were
and
terrified.
I cried. I bawled with my little girl in my arms. Like, I had one day, and now I'm going to kill my baby.
Fault. Exactly. Like, you get so much personal guilt over this. And again, like, it's just not factoring in on a daily basis that God's in control.
He's so much bigger.
That doesn't mean you don't strive to be responsible in that, right. But like that, carrying that guilt is not necessary as a Christian. It's not necessary. Like, we put ourselves through this.
Take that off of your back. I do that to myself.
God is here. He is in control. He has this planned out. He knows how long she's going to live. And it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But we do that all the time. All of us do. Yeah. And
if you don't,
crazy.
You're lying.
I know, exactly.
Why do we do that to ourselves? I don't know. I still do it to this day. I, like, the last few weeks, I've been coming off of medication for anxiety and severe withdrawals. I actually think I weaned incorrectly, but like during those moments, I feel like I'm going crazy because my brain is not sane. And I'm like, I'll never feel good again. just ruined my whole self. Should have never went on the medication and all of these things. And I just ruined my life. And then it's like, you are so
Or even extremes
small.
like, like even when you say like I'll always be honest, like even that is an assumption about the future. Like there's so many factors that are changing all the time, and we have 5 children in the home. There's just so many things. So like we don't know.
We have
don't know
court
what the
cases right now
future-
happening. Like that's okay if you're on medication to help you get through it. That all could change. Yeah. Just in general though, to this day I've lived through all of that plus so much more in my life. And where does my sinful nature take me? Right straight freeway to fear and doubt. Every single time. I have to make a conscious decision, or I have to constantly remind myself that I am not in charge of this game. There's someone so much bigger, so much smarter, and he already knows what's going to happen. Nothing I'm going to do is going to change that.
And it's so comforting. And this gets to the essence of what faith is. Like we've talked about childlike faith and here a bolus of faith, or like great faith given from God. The beauty about faith, as scripture teaches it, and like Lutherans are sticklers about this for this reason, faith comes from the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And its object is not you or your decision or your faithfulness to God or your level of commitment or even just like security, I don't know, just like your steadiness. The object of your faith is Jesus. And that's a done, like that's a person who's real, and everything he's done for you is a done deal. He died on the cross. He paid for your sins. He rose from the dead. And all those who are connected to him in faith have that too, whether we are on a mountaintop or in the deepest valley, ready to give up. Our object of faith is solid throughout all of that. And I find that so leveling. I know in my deepest moments of depression, that was such a beam of bright light, even when I felt terrible, because my faith was based on Jesus, not on my state of mind.
That's why I love the gift of baptism. Because I know that Satan literally attaches to me as soon as there's something there. Just like when we get home from the hospital and you can't get Magnolia home. He's like, oh, I'm going to really play on this. We make him so mad and aggravated. He just finds that one weak spot and he just plays there. It's like his playground for a long time, and it's really hard to fight that. But thanks be to God for baptism, because that's when God promises you, no matter what, you have a sinful nature, so no matter what, I'm going to never give up on you, because you are now my child.
Devil, he's bought me. I'm not yours. Yep. You can say whatever you want to me. At the end of the day, I know that I have a birth certificate that says I'm God's.
And you might get me. I might fall at your feet sometimes, and I might give in to your temptations and your lies, but I know that I have a Father that's never going to give up on me. And he's bigger than you.
He's chasing me. Yeah.
All right. Let's close it, because it's been like an hour, 28 minutes.
Sorry, and I apologize for the time, but it's a big story to tell, and I'm actually kind of glad we told it in its full.
A couple months packed into one story. A few months. Yeah. But yeah, that's our beautiful gift of Magnolia Rose Bilo.
A bolus of faith.
Bolus of faith.
There's one more passage I wanted to read at the end to kind of bookend this.
Okay.
We started with Proverbs, and I want to finish with a verse from Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, which says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Similar to the one we started with, God uses the sky above us compared to the ground and how far they look apart, and they are apart. And when you think of the heavens, that includes the farthest star from you. That's how different God's ways are from ours. And so when we think we understand what's going on, we don't. And it's very comforting to know that the God who created the world and created you and sent his son into the world to save you and perfectly timed all of that with all of history to be just right, and then that you found out about it now, or you were baptized, or you had parents who told you about this, or who someone who directed you to this podcast, whatever, that God has a great and mighty plan for you, and it's so much better than you can imagine. He's got this. Let's just breathe and do our best each and every day to remember that, because that's what allows us to go to bed at night and have peace. Not because we've got it figured out, not because we got the answers, but because we know in the end and in the moment, God is taking care of business. And that's a reason and a source of childlike faith and great faith for all of you.
Can I read one more?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Over by David. So in Psalms, I'm going to read Psalms 121.
Go ahead.
Because
yes,
this
one
was
of my my favorite.
So my favorite since Magnolia too. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And then I always skip to verse 7. They're all great, but in this case, I'm going to go to verse 7. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. The
Amen.
best. When you are in these downward spirals, open up Psalms 121, verse 1, and just read.
Just do the whole thing. It's not very long, and it's
whole
amazing.
Thing. Every single verse. Gets me every time. All right.
God bless you all. May God grant you great faith
Yes.
and the simplicity to let go and remember that he's got it. It's okay.
Amen.
Love you guys.